A very emotional press conference by Marilyn Mosby, and CBS News Justice reporter Paula Reid is joining me now from Washington. Paula, I have heard a lot of prosecutors give a press conference after losing a case. They're usually pretty disappointed, but this press conference was about much more than expressing disappointment. What's your take on it?
Well, it was just over a year ago that we saw Mosby give a similarly passionate press conference. And here we are over a year later. She comes out once again, gives a press conference. But now in 3 separate cases, a judge, a former civil rights prosecutor has found that there was not sufficient evidence to support those charges that she brought in her previous press conference. There was also another trial where a jury could not agree on whether or not there was enough evidence to support the charges, and it resulted in a mistrial. So while she referred to herself as a, quote, minister of justice, ultimately, she's 0 for 6 on the charges that she filed at that press conference about a year ago.
So remind people, because like you said, this has been going on for a year. Take us through the decision process to drop these charges.
The first trial that they had, that trial resulted in a mistrial. To anyone who was inside the courtroom, to anyone who watched the evidence that was presented, that was in some ways considered somewhat of a victory for her because their case appeared to be so weak. But there were some people on that jury that did believe that they could potentially uphold some of the charges. The subsequent 3 officers who were charged, they were all found not guilty. They were acquitted by a judge. They all opted to have their case heard before a judge. And now Marilyn Mosby said herself, the quote unquote dismal likelihood of any convictions on these other 2, possibly 3 if they do a retrial and the mistrial cases, have led her to actually drop these charges. And Marie, she's under increasing pressure from police unions to drop these cases. She has not had any success, but also very importantly, you haven't seen much outcry in Baltimore as the results of these trials have been revealed. You haven't seen mass protests. People have not been outraged. Ultimately, they too have seen the evidence. They have a lot of faith in this judge, and they seem to also agree that the evidence does not support the very harsh, in some cases almost unprecedented charges that she brought in this case.
She made some pretty intense accusations, though, in terms of criticizing the process, the problem with police investigating themselves. And she basically, she made some interesting accusations. She basically said that there were some police who were charged with working with her and working with the prosecutors who, in fact, worked against her and worked with the defense attorneys, that interviews were done improperly, that they actually tried to build a separate case that would work against the prosecution's theory. A lot of accusations there. What's going to happen with all of that?
There's a few things there. I mean, successfully prosecuting police officers when someone dies in their custody or as a result of their actions, it's very difficult. It's a very high bar. But there's very few cases that have fallen apart this spectacularly, this disastrously. And a large part of that is the fact that she brought very harsh, very strict charges against these police officers, and there was just not enough evidence. Now, the things that she alleges, police officers not cooperating, not properly interviewing witnesses, many of those things are true. But she also didn't discuss the prosecution's responsibility in why so many of these cases fell apart. And that is ultimately the fact that she came out very quickly and charged all 6 officers, didn't broker pleas, didn't get agreements to have them testify against one another, and ultimately was not able to prove the charges she brought. That is not the fault of the system. She is absolutely right that there are systemic challenges with successfully prosecuting police officers, but that was not the problem here. Here, she brought charges against these officers that were not supported by the evidence that she had in her possession, and that was the problem, not the system. And I think that's why you're not seeing widespread protests in reaction to these acquittals, because people don't believe it is the system here. The system is a problem, but here, the lack of evidence is why these officers were acquitted.
Very interesting. She also mentioned the tremendous amount of pressure that she has been under, that she received threats, and she sort of snuck it in and then brought it up at the end of the press conference that she's being sued. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, several of the officers are suing her for defamation and false imprisonment. It's actually very interesting. Many legal experts say the case probably won't go anywhere, but their argument, these officers argue that she came out, she had this press conference over a year ago, that she came out and she filed these charges not because they were actually supported by evidence, because she wanted to use those charges to quell the unrest in Baltimore. And their argument is that she defamed them by using them and charging them criminally to quell the unrest in the city. So it remains to be seen whether or not they'll be successful on that argument, but it is a very interesting sort of legal argument to make as to whether or not, we have seen this in other cases, when they've come out, they've aggressively charged someone in a case, a high-profile case within protest, whether or not you have any recourse if you're ultimately acquitted and can argue, hey, you knew that you couldn't support these charges. You charged me to calm things in your city, and that is defamation. We'll see if a judge agrees.
Yeah, we will see. I mean, a grand jury did, allow the case to move forward, so we'll see where that goes. Paula Reid, thank you so much.